We like to think of our planet as a finished map, a conquered territory, where every corner has been catalogued and every shadow illuminated by satellite. But beneath the canopy of Earth's remaining prehistoric forests, a persistent whisper suggests that our mastery over the natural world might be a comforting illusion. For centuries, tales of the Mapinguari have echoed through the Amazonian basin, describing a creature so massive and formidable that it defies modern biological classification. It is depicted as a towering beast with reddish fur, a hide like armor, and a scent so foul it can disorient the bravest of hunters. To some, it is merely a ghost of the jungle, a cultural bogeyman used to explain the terrifying sounds of a forest that never truly sleeps. Yet to others, including seasoned explorers and indigenous groups like the Machigwenga, the Mapinguari is not a myth, but a physical reality that breathes and hunts. This tension between folklore and fact leads us to a startling scientific hypothesis. What if the monsters of our legends are actually the survivors of history? To understand the Mapinguari, we must look back to a time when South America was a laboratory of giants, ruled by creatures of impossible proportions. During the Pleistocene epoch, the landscape was dominated by the Megatherium, a ground sloth the size of an elephant, with claws like reaping hooks. These 6-ton titans were not the slow, canopy-dwelling creatures we know today, but powerful wanderers that shaped the very architecture of the prehistoric wild. Conventional science tells us they vanished roughly 10,000 years ago, victims of a changing climate and the relentless expansion of a new predator, humans. However, the descriptions of the Mapinguari provided by local inhabitants bear a haunting, specific resemblance to these supposedly extinct edentates of the deep past. If a small population survived in the inaccessible heart of the rainforest, they would be the ultimate biological time capsules, hidden by a sea of green. This is the core of the mystery. Is it possible for a megafaunal species to remain invisible to modern science while living right under our noses? Scientists like Dr. David Oren have spent decades trekking through the mud and heat, searching for a single strand of hair or a definitive footprint. They are fueled by the knowledge that the Amazon is so vast and dense that it can swallow entire civilizations without leaving a visible trace. Our human senses are poorly adapted for this environment, where visibility is measured in meters and the humidity muffles the sounds of moving giants. We find ourselves standing at the edge of a green abyss, wondering if our ancestors truly saw the last of the great ground sloths die out. Or perhaps, in the deepest reaches of the Xingu or the Tapajos, the clock of extinction simply forgot to keep ticking for a lucky few. Join us as we peel back the layers of the Amazonian canopy to see if the Mapinguari is a biological relic or a psychological projection. To unravel the mystery of the Mapinguari, we have to look at the geographical stage where this drama unfolds, the Amazon rainforest. Covering over 5 million square kilometers, it is a biological fortress so dense that parts of it remain virtually untouched by modern feet. This isolation creates a perfect vacuum for legends to fester, but it also provides a legitimate sanctuary for species thought to be lost. Throughout the 20th century, rubber tappers and indigenous tribes began reporting encounters with a beast they called the Iznashi, or Mapinguari. These weren't vague sightings of shadows. They were visceral descriptions of a creature that emitted a cry like a human screaming in agony. Witnesses claimed the beast possessed a second mouth on its belly, a detail that seems absurd until viewed through the lens of biology. Scientists suggest this mouth might actually be a specialized scent gland, similar to those found in other mammals used for territorial marking. The creature's armor is another curious detail, described as being so thick that arrows and even bullets simply bounce off its hide. This matches the physiological profile of the extinct ground sloth, which possessed osteoderms, small bony plates embedded within its thick skin. Imagine a living tank, covered in coarse reddish hair, moving through the undergrowth with the weight of a prehistoric ghost. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the sheer consistency of the stories across vast, disconnected tribal territories. How could groups separated by thousands of miles of impenetrable jungle describe the exact same anatomical oddities without a shared physical reference? Anthropologists note that these descriptions don't match any known living animal in South America, like the jaguar or the giant anteater. In 1994, ornithologist David Oren collected over 50 first-hand accounts, many from people who had no prior knowledge of prehistoric paleontology. When shown pictures of various animals, these witnesses consistently pointed to reconstructions of the extinct Megatherium as the closest match. This phenomenon suggests a cultural memory so vivid that it implies the creature was seen much more recently than 10,000 years ago. If the Mapinguari is a relic, it is a master of evasion, utilizing the noise of the jungle to mask its heavy footsteps. But science requires more than stories. It demands physical proof that can be measured, sequenced, and held in a laboratory. So researchers began looking for the biological signatures of a giant, dung, hair, and the peculiar tracks left by a massive biped. The search for the Mapinguari isn't just a hunt for a monster, it's a test of how much of our world remains truly unknown. If we want to move from ghost stories to biology, we must subject the Mapinguari to the cold, hard scrutiny of ecological reality. For a giant mammal to exist, it needs a massive amount of fuel, requiring a specialized habitat and a stable food source. Modern sloths survive on a low-energy diet of leaves, but their giant ancestors were mega-herbivores that cleared entire groves to stay alive. Ecologists look for ecological scars, such as uniquely broken branches or cleared patches of forest that shouldn't exist in a natural cycle. However, the Amazon is a recycling machine where fallen trees are consumed by termites and fungi within months, erasing evidence of a giant's passing. This brings us to the environmental DNA or eDNA method, a revolutionary tool that allows scientists to scan water samples for genetic signatures. By filtering a single liter of river water, researchers can detect the skin cells or waste of every creature that has touched that stream. So far, these genetic nets have caught many rare species, but the specific DNA of a Pleistocene survivor has remained stubbornly absent. If the Mapinguari is real, it must belong to a relict population, a small group of survivors clinging to life in a shrinking world. Biologically, this creates a genetic bottleneck, where a lack of diversity leads to inbreeding and, eventually, a quiet, inevitable extinction. For a species to persist for 10,000 years, it would need a minimum viable population of several hundred individuals to avoid this trap. Could hundreds of 6-ton beasts really hide in a forest, even one as vast as the Amazon, without being caught on a single camera trap? We have seen it happen before with smaller creatures, like the saola in Vietnam, which remained unknown to Western science until 1992. But there is a massive difference in detectability between a small forest deer and a creature that stands 3 meters tall. This is where the scientific case begins to wobble, shifting from the biological to the psychological and the cultural. Many researchers suggest that the Mapinguari is not a living fossil, but a linguistic fossil, a story passed down through 1,400 generations. Ancient humans in South America definitely lived alongside the giant ground sloths. Their footprints have been found intermingled in New Mexico's salt flats. A traumatic or awe-inspiring encounter with such a beast would be etched into a tribe's oral history, surviving long after the last sloth died. Over millennia, the details would morph, the sloth's scent glands becoming a second mouth and its bony skin becoming impenetrable armor. Is it possible that the Mapinguari is a memory so powerful that it still feels like a presence in the dark? To dismiss the Mapinguari as mere fantasy ignores a fascinating possibility that humans are biologically wired to keep monsters alive. In the field of evolutionary psychology, researchers suggest our ancestors survived by assuming a predator in the grass even when there was none. This hyperactive agency detection means that every snapping twig or unfamiliar roar is interpreted as a threat until proven otherwise. In the Amazon, where the environment is an overwhelming sensory assault, this survival mechanism often goes into overdrive for those who live there. But if we look at the history of zoology, we find several cryptids that eventually transitioned from the realm of myth to the pages of textbooks. The okapi, once described as a forest unicorn by explorers in the Congo, was dismissed as a legend until a physical specimen was found in 1901. Similarly, the giant squid was a sailor's nightmare for millennia, the kraken, until deep-sea cameras finally captured its graceful, terrifying reality in 2004. These examples keep the hope of discovery alive for cryptozoologists, who argue that absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. However, the Mapinguari faces a much steeper climb because its existence would rewrite the timeline of the Great American Biotic Interchange. If Megatherium lived until the 20th century, we would have to rethink everything we know about the extinction event that wiped out the megafauna. This leads us to the Lazarus taxon species that disappear from the fossil record for millions of years, only to reappear suddenly. The coelacanth is the most famous example, a prehistoric fish thought to be extinct for 65 million years until it turned up in a fishing net. But a fish in the deep, dark ocean has a much better hiding spot than a giant, ground-dwelling mammal in a terrestrial ecosystem. This is the scale problem in biology. As a creature gets larger, its footprint on the environment becomes harder and harder to conceal. We must also consider the role of mistaken identity, where known animals seen under stressful conditions transform into something else entirely. A giant anteater, standing on its hind legs to defend itself, displays a long snout, powerful claws, and a distinctive, pungent odor. In the low light of a jungle evening, a frightened hunter might see this posture and perceive the legendary mapinguari instead of a common mammal. Yet, this explanation fails to satisfy those who have smelled the specific, paralyzing stench that witnesses describe as rotting meat and garlic. It is this sensory detail, the smell, that remains the most consistent and hardest to fake element across hundreds of independent accounts. Whether it is a beast or a byproduct of the human mind, the mapinguari occupies a vital space in the ecology of our imagination. As we reach the heart of the Amazon, we realize that the mapinguari is more than just a biological question. It is an existential mirror. It represents the part of the human psyche that refuses to accept a world that has been entirely mapped, measured, and sanitized. If science one day proves that the last giant ground sloth died millennia ago, we will have gained a fact, but lost a wonder. The mystery of the mapinguari forces us to confront our own arrogance, the belief that our technology has seen everything there is to see. In reality, we are still discovering thousands of new species every year, from microscopic fungi to elusive primates in the canopy. Our relationship with nature is often defined by what we can control. Yet legends like these remind us of the things that still control us. The fear of the dark, the respect for the deep woods, and the humility of being a small creature in a very large, old world. Perhaps the mapinguari is a guardian of the forest, a psychological barrier that keeps us from treating the Amazon as just another resource. By believing in the beast, we preserve the idea that the wild is still wild, and that some secrets are worth keeping. Whether it is a living relic of the Pleistocene or a collective memory of our ancestors, its impact on our culture is undeniably real. It serves as a bridge between the physical world of biology and the metaphysical world of our shared human story. As the Amazon faces unprecedented threats from deforestation and climate change, the sanctuary for such mysteries is rapidly shrinking. Every hectare of forest lost is not just a loss of carbon storage or biodiversity, but a page torn out of our planet's book of secrets. If the mapinguari is out there, it is running out of places to hide, and its silent end would be a tragedy science might never record. But for now, the reports continue, the footprints appear in the mud, and the scream of the Isnashi still echoes through the humid air. We are left to wonder if we are the masters of this planet, or merely guests in a house built by giants long before we arrived. The quest for the truth is noble, but perhaps there is a greater value in the search itself, in the curiosity that keeps us looking. So, the next time you look at a map of the world, remember the green voids, where the satellites see only leaves. In those shadows, the past may still be walking, waiting for us to remember that we are never truly alone on this earth. What other ghosts are hiding in the corners of our world? And are we truly ready to find them if they decide to step into the light?